course, our target today is to cut down on carbon emissions by 90% by the year 2050. By the way, 2050 is around the corner. In May 2020, 28 major cities have signed World Green Building Council's net zero carbon. Net zero carbon. We want to reach zero carbon. That means we have to do in operations to cut down by 2030 net zero carbon, and by building by 2050 net zero carbon. And it's your job. Buildings are currently responsible for the carbon emission of 30 to 40% as a total city. In order to achieve COP 21, the 21st session that we have agreed to target for 2050, we need to cut down carbon emissions from the building, commercial by 36.5%, and residential by 21.2%. And of course, we do have lots of things that you have to take into consideration: waste, water, energy, and carbon. We're glad to announce that you know it already, that UAE has won the major hosting of the conference COP28, which is the 28th session of the Conference of the Parties. That means the climate change has really met with lots of interest worldwide. What are your thoughts on it? Start by yourself, Mr. Ali.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, George, for the introduction. I think there is a huge commitment, not just in UAE, worldwide, especially with climate change. And UAE has proven over the years that we have high commitment. There is a huge investment, not just investing within UAE, also sustainable projects worldwide. So I think this is a recognition of UAE effort, and this is why actually this international climate change conference will happen here. I think it's 2023, right? Yes, 2023. And this gives us more further, you can say, not pressure, but further commitment that we should lead actually the path of climate change and green buildings. And I think UAE and GCC are always pioneer when it comes to green building and commitment to that. Unfortunately, worldwide there is big challenges when it comes to climate change, and we know there was so many further meetings and commitment from leadership, but from us as a professional people in the industry, we always try to make the difference when it comes to our work. So we really commend UAE taking the initiative to host the event, and we feel it will further help us to not just focusing in providing a service, but also ensuring that we have our role to play to balance between human needs and environment needs. And that is very important because, again, sustainability is all about thinking about the future generation and the earth and how can we positively impact the earth conditions. And hopefully we can do further. Of course, COVID-19 had helped us to see if the human is not very active and sits at home, there is very, very positive things when it comes to climate change. So I'm really glad that UAE is leading the effort and receiving all the delegates in 2023 to talk about this.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. What we are seeing is, in terms of climate change, is that the interval of major climate change events happening, the rate is going exponentially. So if you look at it in 2020, 21 or 19, the hottest recorded days in various continents are enormous. The amount of the occurrence is happening. So the importance and the rate at which we have to respond is much faster, as opposed to we thinking it's going to happen in another 50 years and 100 years.
Do you see that changing year after year?
Absolutely. All the statistics are showing that the rate of change is climate change events that's happening, storms, weather-related events are huge. So then we come back to the COP26, and we are saying, look, we want 1.5 degrees to limit our greenhouse gas emissions. And the UAE is committed behind it completely. And what is awesome here is, coming to the UAE, that this is a place where people put targets, there's vision from leadership, there's capability, and the resources made available to make things happen on time. If you look at the Guinness Book of Records, if any country in the world, it's the UAE. So that capability is driving the change. The leadership is driving the change. So I think it's all very exciting what's happening around for us, and the opportunities which we will discuss later today, huge.
Nishan? Thank you. I do agree with the gentleman. First of all, I think it's important to understand climate change is a global problem. There's no doubt that UAE is taking the first steps in tackling it, and in terms of several factors, the key element here is no longer a CSR initiative. There's actually customer-driven focus. The Gen Z that we were speaking about earlier has a huge onus on responsibility for the environment. They're willing to pay premium as long as developments, projects, cities, countries focus on the environment. Just to give an example of the UAE on its own, importing so much material and all of it goes to our own dump sites here. So end of the day, if you're not going to look at it in a long-term sustainable manner, it won't be feasible to do it. So I think this time it's more than just lip service. There's a lot of initiative on the customer side, that they're willing to pay a premium for corporates, projects, companies that prioritize climate change and the environment. And I think that's the key factor that we have to consider in doing this. Second factor is the high density. I mean, by 2050, 70% of the population, 50 to 70% of the world's population is going to be in cities. And these are really high-risk areas when it comes, because most of them are near coast. So a large part of urban planning has to change, take this into consideration. So I think this reprioritizes the fact that high urban centers like Dubai and nearby cities need to prioritize this on the larger scale. Terry, what initiative do you see to make these changes in building sustainability?
I would speak from a point of view of a waste management, solid waste management company. I think in terms of sustainability, I think when it comes to power, electricity and water, there's a lot of tools, there is a lot of mechanism already in place. But where, at least most of the questions I get is from people who want to see something happen with waste. They want to see what can happen with recycling. How do we reduce waste? My answer is simple. Consume less. We live in a culture where disposables are normal. Nobody uses handkerchiefs anymore. Nobody carries a bottle of water anymore. So these sort of the culture of convenience has taken over our lifestyle, which is causing, at least in the waste management side, we see a lot of waste coming which was not really need to be there, you know. And in COP26, there was not really much talked about waste. There's the only part where waste has a role to play is in emissions. Landfills cause huge amounts of methane emissions. That's the impact that the waste management industry is known for. We as a company are investing in a waste to energy facility which will go live next year. So we hope to take major strides in reducing carbon impact for the UAE at least.
Do you think technology plays a role in sustainability, to improve sustainability?
In terms of solid waste, because it is actually practical hard work. There is no tool yet to manage waste just by using technology. It's technology in terms of mechanics, but not in terms of digital solutions.
Actually, technology is an important pillar. It's not just today. You know, I remember when I started in the FM industry in 2007, and looking at Dubai and Jumeirah, there is so much growth, and you don't have expertise to monitor each building in the physically. You need to monitor remotely. You need to have these smart people sitting like doctors, and they give the cure to the people who maintain this building. So this is the analogy that we want to do. Today, unfortunately, technology is more used to commercialize. So people are thinking about creating a data lake of profiling of customers, and of course, we need to push these customers emails or SMSs to bring them to our destination. So again, technology is used more into customer facing or customer centric, but nobody is focusing on embedding technology into building. I say it is embedded, but it's not practical way of embedding technology that ultimately an expert on building can see today how much I'm consuming in this part or that part, why I'm consuming more energy, why I have failure. So technology that we have in the buildings maybe are state of art, but they are not fit for purpose. Yeah. I don't know if my statement is unfair, but I'm looking at over 20 years of experience that we fix technology, but we don't ask the right person to design it right so we can use this technology in buildings.
Even though we have 2 years now with COVID and we use technology to the highest level, right? So we don't have the know-how to deploy that technology to cut this emission. Okay?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and currently globally, if you look at it, technology has grown exponentially. It's available. The question is how we deploy it, which markets, under what conditions, and under what technical, commercial, and with people. So you can see technology today where you have a 20,000 square meter building, and you'll be collecting approximately 500 graphs per day, right, of what's going wrong or what's going right. And then if you convert that using AI and machine learning, then you make those 500 graphs 3 graphs, of which that's what the doctor has basically ordered, and then we ask the FM to go to the pharmacy, which is fixing the problem. So therefore the cost of getting 500 graphs per day and delivering 3 graphs using AI and machine learning is the way the world is heading. Now, there are certain companies who do it in a certain way and other way, but it's really exciting to see the results you can get in those assets across the world in all asset classes. And we are seeing that now beginning to start in the UAE, and various people are doing various things, and clients are getting the benefits from that. It's a case of multiplying it sooner, because we have some very interesting targets to meet under the COP26 rules, as well as UAE placing a very big part in it.
I'm not going to ask Pepe this question, but I'm going to ask Nishan. Do you think it's expensive or free, like Pepe says?
Sorry, what?
Sustainability. Is it expensive? Do we have to spend a lot of money?
Well, it's interesting when you ask that, because expense is a relative term. So expense compared to what? Expense compared to the future of the only planet that we have. Right? In that sense, it's not expensive. Right? So we have to look at it in terms of relative, whatever the research involved, technology involved. Whether we start with basic sensor, as my esteemed panelist said, AI, machine learning, usage of this tech at this moment is not expensive considering why we're implementing it. Because we don't have an alternative to this planet. So, short answer to that, it wouldn't be expensive in the longer term. But if you were to ask me, just moving back to what Sherry said, for example, in waste, how do we actually, instead of calling waste, we like to call it resource. And I think in a generation, that's what the next generation is going to call it. It won't be called waste anymore. It's essentially a resource. So then the question comes, how do we manage this resource better? What does machine learning do? Exactly. So we might have to start with machine learning where the machine sorts the resource for us in the waste bin. Now I can speak for this as I come from the design manufacturing side, and we actually want to make smart bins where you can deposit waste and the bin sorts it for you. So down the supply chain, the resource is valuable, paper is paper, you're not confused when you go with the Starbucks cup, whether this is plastic or this is paper. So when we are able to bring that level of understanding into the culture, waste is a resource, then waste is a fine example how AI, machine learning can actually help us without being too expensive, reducing the carbon emission and the waste footprint overall.
Even if it's expensive today, in the long run, you'll save much more.
I mean, so expense at the moment, if you have Gen Z coming to you and telling you, if you sell me a shirt or a suit at 20% more, but I know that it's, you know, the environment, it's environmentally consciously obtained, they're willing to do it. So all of a sudden, for corporate, it's no longer an expense. There's an end user who's willing to pay for it. You know, the same reason McDonald's is moving towards sustainable packaging. It's not because it's suddenly not feasible for them. It's very much feasible, but it makes sense because Gen Z is going out there and promoting McDonald's, saying they're better than Burger King and the other brands use sustainable packaging. So the consciousness is changing. The ecological awareness is much higher in this gen.
Sherry, if I may ask you, when do you think is the right time to start to invest in sustainable infrastructure?
I think we're already late. I think it's just a matter of in the last 2 or 3 years there has been so much of awareness created by social media that sustainability is on everybody's agenda. Everybody wants to do something about it, but not necessarily understand what is actually possible. Sustainability is sometimes a very local context. What is actually possible in Dubai, maybe not possible in Sharjah, maybe not possible in Ras Al Khaimah, because the infrastructure and available services behind sustainable waste management does not exist or is not yet feasible. There have been many times that 10 years ago there have been companies set up to recycle plastics, for example, but they could not survive because they were not able to extract enough material at a good value, easy, affordable price to make it sustainable. So economics and sustainability sometimes don't go hand in hand. That's the challenge right now.
Ali, I was saying at the beginning, green building. Do you think that people now understand what you are talking about?
Well, I think luckily I met the founder of US Green Building so many years, 15 years ago in Qatar, in one of the conferences. I said, what did you do, man? We just made the system, everybody is signing up. They are all designing these buildings, spending too much money, probably 30% more. What's going to happen after they get operated? He says, Ali, you're right, we have a problem. It's designed, but unfortunately not designed to be sustainable. It's designed by smart people. It shows good design numbers, that's going to be energy efficient, but you don't have a caretaker after it is finished. And we have a lot of building, unfortunately, green certified buildings, schools, whatever. Today they are not even commissioned during handover. So all these systems are dead. So what I'm trying to say is, unfortunately, technology is an enabler, but sometimes if it is not fit for purpose, or we don't look at the total cost of ownership of these green buildings can be a burden.
But this is your point of view from the people 10 years ago in Qatar. If I ask any one of you to answer me today, what is the awareness level of people today about green building and cut emission, carbon emissions? What?
I mean, from where we've seen across the world, the awareness is getting significant, right? Absolutely significant. And yes, like we've just stated here, we went from building green buildings by infrastructure building within the building, but not operating the building well, because they forgot their fan, right? The consultants would forget their fan, yes? Okay. So then the technology has been developed, is being developed, where how do we get operational efficiency into the FM market, where they go and fix up some of the issues that was created during the construction of the building. And that's reality. Because the reality is that when you build a new building, the development team has a certain budget to meet, and the FM doesn't have a budget until they start using the building. But if you really take it, in the life cycle of a building, the bill of the FM to manage the building is greater than the cost of the building. So for some reason, the FM is not taken into consideration because the owners build buildings and they flip it, right? And that's, the whole world does that. So that's where technology comes in. But the technology, just to add back to the technology story, we have also understand 5 years ago, the total green bonds issued around in the world was $5 billion US. Today the cumulative is 1 trillion 2020. Right? So it went from 5 billion cumulative. Last year was almost $300 billion of green bonds. So that's the market we are looking at. So which means money is going into this market. The question is, how do we take that money and deploy it? Right? And then you get acceleration, you get market transformation happening. So that's where our role today is, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
That means at this stage, do we still need awareness? Or they are all well aware of what's going on?
I think awareness is a continuous process, and the level of alarm is varying in the population as a whole. There are a lot of people who are at the forefront of this. You have corporations actually pushing out sustainability reports, and you're seeing the annual sustainability report become a standard issue across major Fortune 500 firms. And I think that trend is going to continue. So the awareness is going to build naturally with the calamities and the disastrous weather situations we have seen in the last year alone. There's a huge amount of alarm. Smaller, low sea level areas are going to have more alarm than possibly other areas less affected. So the awareness has to continue, there's no doubt. But a base level awareness is definitely there. Having said that, I mean, there are, at the moment, we started the discussion with carbon neutrality. The reality is, there's a lot of push now for carbon positivity. They're push for cities and townships, corporates, I mean, you can name the big boys, Apple, Amazon, and all of them are pushing towards carbon positivity. How do you push carbon back into the environment? So this isn't possible with a high level of awareness. There's definitely an awareness level, but it needs to keep escalating, because we have only one, not all of us can go in rockets and push off elsewhere,
So yes, we still need some words, of course. Let me ask one question to every one of you, which is the same question. We'll start by you, Sherry. If you get the chance to do a change, one simple change that you want to do in all buildings in Dubai, what will it be?
I will implement an access control system for all buildings in Dubai. Anybody wants to throw any waste, they have to have an access card which allows them to throw the waste, so that that individual or that family can start coming to know their impact and what kind of waste they throw, how much does it cost, all of this. Just to share an idea, I've been to Switzerland for a holiday, and I happened to stay with my brother's house, and he unfortunately had to travel when I arrived. So he was staying in a very modern building, green building, one of the best buildings I have ever stayed in. And after a few days I generated some waste. I tried to find a way to throw it out of the place. I looked for a garbage chute since I'm from Dubai. I didn't find the garbage chute. I was baffled. I was like, what's wrong with these guys? So obviously I didn't want to ask anybody how to throw waste. So I started walking around the area and I found a curious looking projection on the street. So after fiddling with it for a while, I figured out that's the waste bin. And I was so happy, okay, finally I can throw the waste. But I couldn't open the bin. I was like, oh my God, now what do I do? And so I didn't want to call my brother in the US, so I went home, and they had a logo on the bin. So I found a access card with that logo. I went back to the bin, tapped on the bin, the lid opened, I was happy. I could finally throw waste. I put the waste in, closed the bin. 5 minutes I get a call. What did you do? I said, what? Did you throw waste? I said, yeah. He said, they just charged me for it. So I think that's the impact that I would like.
Access control. Here? What would you like to change in the buildings in Dubai?
We should do what we do best in Dubai. You put a target, you put a date for emissions reduction, example, 7% per year, year on year. And we hit our targets, all the buildings, and then we work towards net zero, which means we hit our net zero target. And that's the Dubai way, and that's what we should do. And if we do that, we're going to show the rest of the world we can talk, but we can walk the talk. And then COP28, that's what happens.
Leaders as usual. Nishan?
For buildings in particular, I think the highest carbon emission will probably be, as Sherry said, from the waste more than anything else. If there could be a better way to manage that'd be best. Probably segregation at source, using some level of automation to identify. Of course, piggybacking on the idea of charging residents for throwing waste is going to be something that involves policy making and quite a bit of backlog on that. But I think that's the right direction to go in. It's only when you start to build individual ownership will you have more accountability. And I think that's definitely possible to build, considering how important safeguarding the environment is. So I think that's the best way to do for a building.
Let's wrap this topic with Ali. I know it's a big topic and they planned for it years ahead. To wrap it in a few minutes, I think it's
I probably burned 1,000 calories thinking about the answer for this question. It's a very good question. I think when we talk to the government officials in Dubai and we say we want to build a building, we say we want to do a traffic impact study and maybe we need to build a bridge, especially for malls. So why don't we do the same for building? When we build a building, what is the carbon footprint of this building? What is the sustainability impact of this building on planet Earth? Looking at the total cost of ownership. Because unfortunately, consultants build, and once the project is over, they're not liable for their design. They run away. There is no feedback loop, and we make the same mistake when it comes to sustainability in the design of building. So hopefully we can have a sustainability, assessment done for building before we build this building. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? She's coming with the microphone. She's still coming with the microphone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sam. I am from Fakhruddin Holding. First, thank you for this wonderful session. It's a pleasure understanding what is happening here. As Fakhruddin Holding, in line with the UAE's vision, we have taken an internal target of becoming net zero by 2030. We have been very aggressive. And we realize that the only way we can achieve this is not only by reducing our emissions, but also working on carbon capture. Because to control emissions at this point of time is going to be really difficult. The easier way is to offset our carbon footprint by capturing the carbon which we emit here in Dubai and other places. Now, what we would like to know is how do we connect with the right people in the government and other entities like us who are committed towards net zero and collaborate. Because as an individual organization, we have limited resources. But together, as a group, sitting here, if all of us work together, then we can achieve what UAE has committed to the whole world. How do we connect and collaborate? That's the question.
Thank you. I'd like to just also being from the private side, I would like to say, I don't know if you're aware of Dubai's Sustainability Chapter, right? It's an initiative by the Chamber of Commerce. We are a chartered member. I would say that's an ideal first step for you. I think at the moment there's about 16 chartered members, all of them having a very keen interest in sustainability. We're the only design manufacturing firm as far as I know. So that would be a good first place to start. I must tell you, we're just writing down the rules right now.
They have monthly meetings as well.
Yes. Monthly meetings and a lot of thought leadership there in what can be done, and very specific, localized to us, not something that's being picked up from Copenhagen or with very limited relevance on application. So that would be a good place to start, but any of the other members can please come.
Thank you, Nishan. Thank you for your contribution, input. Thanks, everybody, and let's take a picture.
You've got this picture.